we're back. Good afternoon, everyone. Real City Ambassadors here, Rodrigo Duran. I am stoked. I'm excited. I've been looking forward to this conversation with none other than Jeff Hunt. Jeff moved to San Francisco in 2000 because he loves the art, the culture, and the history here in the Bay in San Francisco specifically. His journey into storytelling began in 2008 when he co-founded Muni Diaries. He produced biannual live storytelling show starting in 2009. And in 2016, he launched his very own podcast, one of my favorites, Storied San Francisco. He's going to tell us about that. He's going to tell us about his background, certain events that he produces, and the people that he collaborates and works with to create this beautiful piece of art. So without further ado, everybody, Jeff Hunt. Hola.
Hola, Rodrigo. Thank you for having me. This is cool. I'm excited to do this.
Yeah, it's a little. I'm a bit nervous. I'll be very honest because you are a host of your podcast, and I'm like, man, I'm gonna interview the host. I like
it's meta. It's very meta. I've thought about that because I don't. To this, like I've had people on my show who do podcasts, but it's never been just they're like friends, so it's a little less like it's tricky because you're turning the and I also have never been really interviewed like this on a podcast. So yeah, it's like uncharted territory for both of us. So let's do it. It's exciting. It's cool. I'm into it.
Let's do origin stories because I know we're going to talk about what you got here in 2000. But where are you from, Jeff?
I'm originally born and raised in Fort Worth, Texas. My parents both ended up there kind of by accident. They're from different parts of Texas, and they met in Austin, UT Austin. They were both going there in the kind of like late 50s, early 60s. Kind of a cute, funny story, but my mom was friends with my uncle first. I don't think they dated or anything, but my uncle, they were friends, and my uncle's all to my mom was all, hey, you should meet my brother. And then my dad walks in and he's like, young, strapping West Texan dude. Really charming. I have to say I love my dad. I love both my parents, but so something happened. They charmed each other, and 15-ish 12, 13, 15 years later, I was born. I'm the youngest of three boys. So sorry, Mom.
The crazy one.
Yeah. But so I was raised or kind of came of age in the late 70s. I identify with the 80s was like, my teenage years. Went through public school. Surprisingly, I don't know if I noticed at the time because it was just normal reality, but especially in hindsight, and as I got out to see more of the world and the world changed, when I look back on my public schooling, like it was fairly diverse. Like it wasn't, it might have been something close to like half white, but like plenty of Black folks, plenty of Hispanic folks, and even some South Asians, Indian, Vietnamese. And I just kind of like, especially before middle school, I was kind of like a popular kid. I had friends from all different backgrounds, and it was pretty rad. The thing that changed though, I made a conscious decision in the 6th grade to start riding a skateboard, to be a skater. So this is back in 86, and I know it's different everywhere, but in Texas, at least in the suburb where I grew up, if you were a skater, you couldn't be popular. You were basically like ostracized. So from like 6th grade on through I barely graduated, but anyway, I had my friends, and we were definitely skaters. We got into music a little later in high school years, but we definitely were kind of like our own little crew. But through that, I got to say I'm very grateful because the music stuff, like I was in a couple of bands, and we ended up doing little tours, like not renting vans. We bought a van and went out and started seeing the world and seeing the country. And I think that shaped a lot of me.
Did you come to San Francisco in those
So
tours?
so it's funny. We ended up doing 2 tours. One we broke down in the middle of. The band broke down, and we broke down. I'll be honest, but it was going to be a huge nationwide tour, and because of that, like we never made it to the West Coast. But we ended up putting out a 7-inch record, I think like 4 or 5 songs, and it ended up selling better in San Francisco than anywhere else, even though we never came here.
What style of music?
Kind of like emo punk, I guess you'd say, very influenced by stuff that was happening in the 80s in the punk scene in DC, like political emo punk.
Yeah.
Which also, I have to be honest, like not only for myself traveling, but getting in touch with that scene really started opening my eyes to like global politics and the US's role in it. Definitely big awakenings. Like, this would probably be around when I was about 17, 18, but went vegetarian. I was like, I'm not going to buy gas from Shell because they're supporting apartheid in South Africa. And anyway, I mean, in hindsight, it's just like started opening my mind to learning about and reacting to how the world works.
So when did San Francisco come to the picture?
Yeah, my first ever time to come to San Francisco. So after those tours and our band broke up, the guy who put out our record and put some of the East Coast stuff together asked us to move out to Maryland, to his place, kind of between Baltimore and Annapolis. And we were like, we're like kids from the suburbs in Texas. We were like, fuck yeah, let's do that. Sounds awesome. I wasn't even thinking about college. I was like, college is for the man. Like, fuck that.
No way. You were that punk rocker.
Yeah. So we went out there and we were living there. This is 1993. And some of my friends who lived in that house had basically hitchhiked and hopped trains across the country. This is like, we're starting to like get influenced at that point by beat generation writers like Jack Kerouac.
Oh,
wow. All that stuff, getting really into that. So kind of inspired by that. And they ended up in San Francisco and stayed here for a little bit. And they'd like send us postcards like, we're drinking wine on a balcony and it's like winter, but it's 65 degrees. I was like, what the hell is this place? Long story short. Yeah, long story short, I guess they didn't have it in them to hitchhike and hop trains back to the East Coast. So they're like, hey, do y'all want to drive across country and pick us up? And I was like, of course we want to do that. Yeah. So that was my first time. I guess it would have been 93. Didn't spend a whole lot of time here, but got my first impression for sure. Of the place.
I mean, aside from, I can imagine the touristy areas, like what others, did you go to other places that made you feel like, wow, this is maybe a place I can see myself living in?
At that time, I didn't necessarily think about living here. But it did leave such a strong impression on me. I by the time we got here, the folks that my friends were staying with were also part of that like political emo punk kind of underground scene, like 924 Gilman, the Mad here, like that kind of scene. And while I didn't go to any shows there, those are the kind of folks I was kind of running around with, like folks who were doing like Food Not Bombs and like other types of like, volunteer charitable stuff. And I dug that, but I also dug the architecture and the weather and the natural beauty, because it was like really nothing I had ever seen before. And I hold that 27 years later, I feel the same way. It's like, this place is just not like anywhere else. Is this
Food Not Bombs?
That's Food Not Bombs, yeah. So we were doing Food Not Bombs.
I mean, I'm just curious, like you mentioned Food Not Bombs, like why? And I can kind of see, I'm trying to piece things together.
Yeah. We were doing Food Not Bombs out in Washington, D.C. in Lafayette Park, which is across the street from the White House. And so like that, I don't know, I just threw that out as one example of like the kinds of folks that we were running with at the time.
I see. Okay.
And because we found those people, I was like, oh, like my kind of people are here. So again, while I didn't necessarily think I'm going to live there someday at that time, I was like, I was like, there's great people there. So, and that first impression was so strong and made such an impression on me. It's something that I often ask folks on my show, especially if they're transplants like I am. I'm like, I want to hear about your first time in San Francisco. Like, what, tell me about that. And I think it's something that folks can relate to. Like
any I don't know, off the bat, anything that you were like, I don't know, I like that, in San Francisco. Were there any first impressions? Yeah.
At that time, not really. I mean, there's kind of like tongue in cheek, growing up, a lot of places that aren't California and especially Texas, because I'm not going to say they have a chip on their shoulder. It's envy. Yeah. They envy California. But growing up, it's like, oh, California's going to fall into the ocean. So like that earthquake thing. And like, I was old enough. I think I was like 16 or so in the 89 earthquake. I was like watching the World Series. I was like, oh shit, California's going to fall into the ocean. So, but I mean, I guess if I was like asked to find something that was more of a con than a pro, I would say that it wasn't ultimately anything that, is like going to keep me away.
And then I want to move to 2000 because that marks I mean, we didn't die in 1999.
Thank God.
And you're like, now I know I want to do something with my life. I'm gonna go to San Francisco because it's the millennium. Tell me about that decision and how that happened.
Sure. So my road to San Francisco from Texas actually goes through New York City. Yeah, I know. I fixed that mistake very quickly. I lived there for I graduated. I did go back and eventually go to college at UT in Austin. Had a great time, loved it, and as I got closer to graduation, at that time I had lived on the East Coast and I had lived a little bit in Chicago. So I was thinking like, I want to try living in a big city. And for me, it was either San Francisco or New York. And the young woman I was dating at the time had graduated before me and went to New York. I was like, well, I guess I'm going to go to New York. Not that it wasn't entirely my decision. I was willing to give it a try. I do love New York. But long story short, a year of New York just kicked my ass. And I was like, I still think of New York, even more so than San Francisco, as it has a personality. It's like a person, and you can like it, but if you live there, it has to love you back. And New York just didn't love me back. And I was like, why am I struggling? Like working my ass off, not making any money, living in basically like a shoebox apartment. And a good friend of mine from Austin had graduated at the same time, and he had been here that whole year. So I was in New York, he was here, and he's like, yeah, you're having a hard time in New York. Why don't you come out here? And I was like, I took a trip in April of 2000, and I was like, oh, just seriously, instantly, I was like, this is where I need to be.
Yeah. And when did you end up moving?
2 months later, I did get a rental car because I didn't have a car in New York. I couldn't find anyone to ride out with me across country, so my mom flew out. That was fucking awesome. My mom flew out from Texas, and she's like, let's do a cross country road trip. I was like, fuck yeah, that's right up my alley. Yeah, so that was awesome. So that would have been in June of 2000, and my friend who had already moved here, he's like, you can just live with me, and that was at California and California and Larkin.
California.
That was my first place I lived. Yeah. And right away, my friend and I ended up starting a band.
So help me out real quick. Right. So for folks that are watching, where are we looking at?
Kind of like Nob Hill-ish. People call it Tender Knob, but I'm like, it's not really the Tenderloin. It's not tender.
So it's right here. So right here in this area?
Yeah, kind of on that line, because I think that's California Street is that line. Yeah, so like between what did they call it? I can't even read that. But like, so like really close to like the Polk Street corridor, which is where I feel like I naturally gravitated toward that. The Hemlock wasn't around yet, but Chemo's was a venue that that was around. I
I
think
know
it's
some.
Post and Polk. Yeah. And so like for a minute there, my job, which was at Post and Van Ness, my home, we had a music studio in that same neighborhood. So like my San Francisco world, that first year or so was in that like pocket of the town. And to be honest, I hoofed it everywhere I went. I rode Muni a little bit, but I was like, dude, walking's faster. And this city is, that's when I learned how walkable San Francisco is.
Yeah.
Because it's like, it's not an obvious thing, especially if you're not from here and you've never been. You're like, no, it's hilly as fuck. But you're like, nope, it's tiny.
It is
And
tiny.
and the hills, man, that's good for your, it's good for your heart. It's good for your abs and your legs. Like, so I quickly learned and just appreciated how walkable the city was. Even though that first year, I didn't leave that area too much. Came to the Mission a couple times, discovered places like the Kilowatt and Casanova. I mean, I was pretty young and mid, like in hindsight, didn't really know how to drink yet. But those are the places where I feel like I learned how to drink.
And did you? I mean, you eventually did you begin working at the Academy of Art University, or that's later on, or did you do Muni Diaries first?
Yeah.
When
so
did all that come together? Because I know that
yeah.
kind of this trajectory that you are leading right now.
Yeah. So I'll just kind of breeze through it. I had a number of kind of odd jobs, a little bit tech, but I'm an editor, so I was never like on the tech side, but working for websites because that's what just existed. But it wasn't really fulfilling at all. So I decided to go back to school at SF State. I went for a journalism degree at SF State.
Nice.
And that's where I ended up meeting and hatching the idea for Muni Diaries. So graduated in 2005, and I think we ended up launching as like a blog in 2008. And like you mentioned in the intro, so started off as a blog, and we're like, how are we going to get stories of people on the bus? And then the mix.
You got to talk to me about the equipment you used, and then that process, and how did you approach people?
So
Muni, San Francisco, you can create I think Tongo said it best. You can make a movie out of it.
You could make like a 17-part movie that would have 5 sequels. Yeah. Well, as far as equipment, I mean, we didn't really know what we're doing. We're just like, I knew how to build a WordPress blog. I was like, we'll just start as that. And I had heard of these things, definitely knew what Facebook was, but I'd heard of this thing called Twitter. And I was like, I guess we should get one of those. And like, anyway, long story short, a lot of hustle that first year, just getting the word out. And then slowly it got to that point where it was like, the stories are finding us. Like we established, I guess, a presence just getting out there, which I have to thank social media, despite all its evils, for that. And then I think inspired by, and they're still doing this, a group that does an event called Writers with Drinks. And it's basically for, poets, writers, nonfiction, fiction, anyone to get together and probably do readings. And I'm sorry?
Where do they tend to meet, Writers with Drinks?
Back in the day, back when they inspired us to start our thing, they were mostly doing at the Makeout Room over on 22nd.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so that kind of inspired us to do, like, to try to put together these live storytelling shows, which is something I had never done. And from that very first one, which we were like, yeah, it'll just be like free, with like a donation box. And the bar, I remember they were like, that's them. Yeah, Charlie Anders is kind of the spearhead of that. She's amazing. Wow. Yes. In summary, the first show was just such a hit. I remember the bar was like, there was like one bartender, and they were like, oh shit, I wish we had known, because they needed a little more than one. Anyway, but that really got me going on the live storytelling thing, which that lasted starting in 2009 until I left in 2016. We were doing at least 2 of those a year. I'm not going to lie, a lot of work, putting on live events like that,
Mm.
but always just so rewarding. The whole experience, but also the folks on stage sharing their stories. And that was a big part, I think, informed what I'm doing now. Toward the end of my time, I want to give some shout outs real fast. Because toward the end of my time, when I was still with Muni Diaries, I met the woman who's now my fiance, Erin Lim. And she, I guess at the time, her podcast, Bitch Talk, was about 3 or 4 years old. They're about to celebrate their 500.
Oh, no way. Your fiance does Bitch Talk. I follow
She's
them too.
Bitch Talk. So they're, I'll plug this later,
cool.
but they're about to celebrate their 500th episode. Anyhow, so I came into that world, and I was just like,
full of podcasters,
oh yeah, that's us. We're that couple.
Good.
No, but I was like, right away, I was just so inspired by what she had been doing and was still doing, and I was like, oh, so my thought was we could. All the Muni Diaries events had been videoed, and I was like, we could strip out the audio and make a podcast out of that. So that's what we did. Excuse me, and so I was with that for a little bit, and then that's when I decided to leave. And for a minute, go ahead. That's
Tell me about this photo. I mean, I pulled it off your LinkedIn account, but I thought I love it. You know, it's like you have the signage, sign up to tell a story. What is this all about?
So we always wanted to make those shows, like we had our lineup, but we also wanted to leave room for sort of an open mic type portion of the show. So that's what this was. I'd be there. I think I was always the one manning the table, but it was like before the show, we have like a 30 minutes or an hour or so for people to mingle. And if they want to share their own story, because that was kind of more in keeping with the spirit of the project. Like,
I see.
We wanted to get like storytellers and people who would put on a good show up on stage, but also make it more about the community, and like anyone can share their story. So that's what that picture is.
Okay. So
I'm like, damn, I was young and more than a few pounds lighter.
Anyone pre-COVID was young. And then you look at post-COVID, we're all old now. But and going back to then creating Storied SF.
Yeah.
How did the name come about, the project, and so on?
So for a while there, when I was still doing Muni Diaries, I had started thinking, as much as I love Muni and it's a constant source of life and stories, I was like, yeah, but then there's this city, there's this town, there's this area, and I had already been thinking like I want to get off the bus and explore more of that. But I gotta be honest, when I left, at first I kind of, because I'd been doing it for 8 or so years, and I was like, I don't know what I want to do. For a minute there, I think it's kind of a funny whatever story, but I was thinking about trying to bring breakfast tacos to San Francisco. So breakfast tacos are a real big San Antonio, Austin thing.
Okay, tell me about it.
And I was like, we got all the ingredients here. We got dope ass tortillas, and it's basically just like eggs, beans, cheese, potatoes, maybe chorizo.
Got it.
Throw whatever you want in there. And so I started, I was kind of serious about it. I was like, to make a mark and to like make this stick, you got to have good salsa. So I started working on salsa. This is like the summer. No, sorry. The spring of 17. And I started working on making a green and a red salsa. I was like, did
you go to Mexico at all to try some out?
I didn't. And I think that speaks to like how I didn't get quite serious enough about it. But I started thinking like of what it would mean to, to either to get a truck or to find a brick and mortar, and also total respect to anyone in the food industry, because that is such hard work. And I started really thinking about it. Yeah. And, I was like, do I want to do something completely new? Or I had that idea of marrying San Francisco storytelling with this new medium that I really enjoyed doing, which was podcasting. And so right around the time that I made that switch from breakfast tacos to podcasting, I had known Michelle Kilfeather for roughly a year. And sometime right around that time, our relationship was that she's a bartender and I was a bar patron. But I would always sit at her bar and got to know her and stuff, but somehow missed that she's this amazing photographer. So one day she just mentioned it. She showed me her Instagram. I was like, holy shit. And then I went home. I don't know if it was that night or in the next couple of days, I was like, what if we bring photos into the storytelling medium? So that's Michelle. And I gotta say, another
You're yin to your yang, and I love that. You all play Batman and Robin. I love that about your podcast. So shout out to Michelle, really.
Yes.
I want to meet you one day. And
you will.
Yes,
you will.
Yeah. So and then how did y'all get it? Podcast married?
Totally. So once I decided, that would be rad if she would. Then I was like, maybe kind of like what you're talking about. Like I was a little nervous because I really wanted her to do this, and I don't think I had talked about the project with her before at that point. But so the next time I went into her bar, I was like, because she probably knew about the breakfast taco thing. I was like, that's done. That's done. I'll make him at home for me and my friends. I was like, but I'm going to do this podcast, and super nervous, even though I was like drinking a beer. But I was like, and do you want to join? Like, do you want to be the photographer? Do you want to do this with me?
Yeah.
And her eyes lit up. She's just like, yes. So a big part of that is that like kind of a running conversation in that year that we had known each other was because she has a background in art. She moved here a little before I did, but art and photography and music and bartending, working class folks.
Yeah.
So we had so many conversations about what is happening to this city. And at that point, this is 3 or 4 years ago. Obviously it is still happening in a sense, but we decided that with Storied San Francisco, it was going to be our reaction to that instead of just sitting around complaining about what's happening and hoping that you are able to keep a job and keep your rent control and that kind of thing. It's like, no, let's celebrate because there is still a heartbeat here.
Yeah,
it's strong. And so right away, we started, the folks we started having on the podcast right in the beginning, bartenders, comedians, journalists, artists of all stripes, eventually some teachers, some doctors. There it is.
I want to showcase some photos, and also you're talking about the people that you interview.
Yeah.
If you haven't checked them out, do so today and listen in.
Yes, please. Yeah. So fast forward, 3 years to where we are now, and we're getting up to close to 140 episodes over 3 seasons.
Wow.
So that first year, there was kind of the approach that I took with Muni Diaries, which was just let this thing grow organically. Just start doing it, start doing the hustle, putting it together, scheduling, recording, editing, taught myself GarageBand, which is what I still use, just kind of basic audio editing. I got to give another shout out to Charlene Goto. She is the producer on Bitch Talk, a good friend of Aaron's, and I consider her a good friend of mine as well. She was like my consultant because she's been podcasting since before they started Bitch Talk in 2013. She's like a pioneer.
Wow.
And just super helpful. Got me hooked up on like all my audio equipment. Setting up a podcast hosting site, which I use Libsyn for now, and all that, and just kind of the nuts and bolts of beyond going out and finding people and sitting down and getting their audio, like what it takes to do a podcast. So I really have to thank Shar immensely, and I think I already mentioned, but the inspiration that Aaron brought from Bitch Talk is enormous. But so that first year we just kind of hit the ground running, and I think what we did was got to the point where we had 3 or 4 episodes ready, and then we launched, right? Because you got to get some lead time.
Yeah.
And somewhere kind of early in that first season, we started finding folks who when we recognized it at the time, but especially now in hindsight, certain people that we would meet and have on the show ended up being hubs and giving us so many more people.
Yeah.
Right. And that's just the nature of, especially a town like this. It's like, if you meet a couple of the right people, it just fans out from there. And so now,
what was that moment where you felt like, wow, I'm not doing a lot of outreach as I was in the beginning, and I'm getting, feedback from others and interest from people. When was that?
So late in the first season, and this was kind of serendipitous. So Aaron's brother, Daryl Lim, who's been on the show, and he's a born and raised San Franciscan, amazing guy. He's also, in my family, but I can say objectively, he's a really, really great guy. And his birthday must have been in 2018. We had dinner in Chinatown, and he brought a couple friends, and one of his friends, the husband of a lifelong friend of his, is a dude named Mike Lynch, who I ended up sitting next to at dinner, and thank God, because he and I just hit it off. So Mike's, the relevant story is that he runs a screen printing shop called Babylon Burning down over south of Market. And so I was like, I friended him, and I was like, so, hey, you want to be on my podcast? And through Mike, like directly through Mike, but also a few folks who Mike might not have known personally, but who knew about Babylon Burning, that was like the first kind of big hub. And that's Babylon Burning.
Wow.
They're dope. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I've seen these.
Legacy business.
Yeah.
And just, just the best people. Super generous, super creative, all about, supporting arts and artists. Very fortuitous meeting that night at dinner in Chinatown. So shout out
and
to
where
Mike
are they
Lynch.
located? Shout out to Babylon Burning.
Yes.
Where are they?
They're on they're in an alley called Bluxom between 4th and 5th. So and Bluxom is between, I want to say, Brandon and Townsend. I hope I have that right. So they're over there, pretty close to the ballpark, pretty close to Caltrain. Like I said, they're like a wicked screen printing operation. They're like a well-oiled machine. Super, super cool. They have a gallery in the front of the shop there called 63 Bluxom Gallery. Mike's brother Clam Lynch runs that, and they're just, I'm so grateful that we met them.
What was that first season like for you when you wrapped it first, and then I want to ask, when did you decide this was season 1? And what are some kind of takeaway from that season?
Yeah. So we started off, and we still are, a weekly podcast, right? So each episode, even though a lot of episodes are broken into part 1, part 2, each episode is a week. And so somewhere in the middle there of that season, we realized, we're like, damn, this is a lot of work. We're going to need some time off. And so I was like, okay, 52 weeks. What if we gave ourselves 3 weeks off?
Okay.
And that number 49 is a little bit significant around here.
Bingo.
So we're like, perfect. We'll call it season 1, 49 episodes. So it was realizing, through doing it organically, just realizing how much work went into it. At the time, also, Michelle was shooting all of our guests on film photo. So there was like a little bit of a lag of like getting the film process developed and then scanned for the digital stuff that we were doing. So she switched to digital now. That's a whole story. But back then there was also a little bit of more of a lead time between when we could record and when we could publish. So, but we did, going back to the live storytelling thing, we did realize toward the end of season 1, we're like, let's do a live event. And we're going to have it's going to be poetry. It's going to be storytelling. It's going to be art. It's going to be photos. It's going to be sculpture. We just wanted to celebrate the arts in San Francisco. So that first show that we ended up doing, what's that you got there? No, that was a little later. No, the first show we did was I'm totally blanking on the name of this space. It's an event space in Southland Market on Folsom near 7th, and it's just huge gallery with like
Okay.
huge walls. Their normal clientele was like tech companies who pay top dollar, but they're like, we like what y'all are doing, so we'll let them subsidize y'all's event for cheap. And we're like, right on. So,
That's power.
so yeah, so it was such a huge show. We learned after the fact that we probably were a little over ambitious as far as, I think we had 18 between photography and like painting, visual art.
Yeah.
We had 18 artists to wrangle.
Wow.
And
Oh.
God love them, but
were these all from your podcast or just artists that you wanted to highlight?
Kind of a mix of folks who had already been on, and then folks, we just knew, especially Michelle and her connection to the photography and art world. Yeah, and then we got a pretty awesome lineup. We got Broadcast Stewart to be our MC for the storytelling.
Nice.
Which he had been on the podcast before that. So and we ended up calling it 2 Storied Nights. And so the thing was, it was like, it was like first night was like an art opening with all the art up and it's free to the public. I think we had a DJ, and like, we like left out some snacks. We had like a bar where people could buy cheap, beer and wine stuff. And then the second night was a ticketed event where we had the storytelling folks. So and it was amazing. Like I said, we learned that we were probably a little over ambitious, having that many people and doing 2 nights was a little bit much. So
how did you pick the people that did live stories? Because one thing is having a podcast, the other thing is editing, and then live in front of people. How did you pick those individuals? Because they have to be very comfortable, right?
Yes. So I think maybe I took a little bit of what I had learned with Muni Diaries and that project. And so our storytellers at that first show were all folks who already do storytelling or do live poetry and that kind of thing. And they were folks that we were lucky enough to meet that first season. So we already had relationships with them. We already knew them and their stories and also their art and what they would bring to a live event. So that's how we put that together.
I'm taking notes, by the way. I'm gonna steal the secret sauce from Jeff. And
just I gotta emphasize how grateful we are to know all of the people that that we've had the fortune of having on the show and be part of our live events. So fast forward to the end of season 2. The lessons that we learned from the first one, we ended up putting on a show called Love Letters to the City. And I got to give a shout out to Sherry Franklin of Muttville. So we had her on the show. And I think it was when I sent her the link to her episode, she listened and she's like super into it. She's like, this turned out to be really great, Jeff. It's like, she's like, it sounds like a love letter to the city. And I was like, oh shit.
Who did the art to this? This is amazing.
Another shout out to Lil Tuffy, a friend of ours. We've had him on the show. He was nice enough to do this original art that was hand screen printed.
Wow.
We still have posters. If y'all want to donate, we'll send you a poster. And they're large. I forget the exact size, maybe like 14 by 18 or so. Yeah. They're pretty big and they're super. Yeah. I remember the day that he sent us that art, I was like, oh shit, we made it. Because I mean, look at it. It's beautiful. And I'm not taking credit for it. Like, it's his art, but it's for what we do. And I was just like, oh man. I was like,
and
Michelle.
You did this? Okay, so right before the pandemic.
This was back in January. So it was what we did that first season, and then with this show, we kind of made them like, like a wrap on season 1 / a launch of season 2. This one would be a wrap on season 2, launch of season 3. And I remember because that gallery we had done the first show at, they're like, we can't do those anymore. Not because of the pandemic. They're just like, we can't give y'all that that deal. So we're like, okay, we're broke. We don't have any money. So how are we going to do this? And another just coincidence, we were out at Mike Lynch's house.
Who's Mike Lynch?
Oh, sorry, he's Babylon Burning.
Okay, got it. Going back.
Yes, we were out at his house recording his daughter Ava for the podcast. She's amazing. Look her up, Ava Lynch.
I will.
Just anyway. And I had dinner with them that night, another dinner with Mike Lynch, and he's like, why don't y'all just do this show at our gallery down on Bluxom Street? And we're like,
boom.
What?
Uh-huh.
It ended up being even digging in further to just how generous and how fucking awesome Mike and his wife Judy are.
When was this? When did you all put on the
show?
The show?
So that was, it was the opening show was January 11 of this year, which is, I'm like, that was like 17 years ago, but yeah. And then we decided, because it's called Love Letters to the City, and we're working closely with the gallery owners who have given us this space for free, which is amazing. And it's love letters. So we're like, we could have it up until Valentine's Day and have a closing party on Valentine's Day. So the opening party was 3 poets, Cassandra Dallett. No, sorry, 2 poets and a band. So Cassandra Dallett was one of our poets, Kara Morrison, and then Ava Lynch's band, Preschool, played. Super cool show. I think everyone had a good time. It was like, it felt kind of old school, almost like, you know, like an art show you might have gone to in like 98 or something. Super great turnout, super great response in the gallery. So that was like in the screen printing shop part of Babylon Burning. In the gallery, we had I think 4 or 6 photographers. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting right now, but like their photograph, just a photo show and their photos. And then we had a projector that would play this kind of compilation of different excerpts from the podcast, along with Michelle's photos of those people projecting on the wall. But this might have been my favorite part. My neighbor, another shout out to Lindsay Repko, my good friend and neighbor. She's a super crafty person, and she's like, I have this mailbox, and we could put a mailbox and have some stationery for people to write love letters to the city and put them in the mailbox. And we left that up the entire duration of the show. So the show was up for, I guess, 5 weeks or so. And we got a bunch of letters. And this is like right before pandemic. I was like, we're going to do something. We're going to do like a zine. We're going to like maybe do a reading of all these letters. The pandemic hit, so that's still kind of on the back burner. But yeah, what a great. And then we had a closing show on the 14th on Valentine's Day. We had a friend of the show and someone who'd been on before, Brian Belknap. He's a one-man band, and he was like out on Bluxom Street with this one-man band playing music for folks. The photos were still up. It was just a really, especially now looking back on live events that we used to be able to do very easily and be in
for granted almost.
Absolutely. Yeah. To be inside of a crowded venue, that's it. I'm just super grateful that we were able to get that off before this all hit.
What can you tell me about this organization and how it relates to you?
Absolutely happy to not only to mention them, but to give them props for what they're doing. So this story goes back to a hot tub up in Mendocino for me, as these things do. Yeah. So I met Dara Kosberg through my fiance Erin, and we were having Christmas up in Mendocino, and Dara was like, we were talking to her. She didn't have anywhere to go, and we're like, come on up and hang out with us. So it was in that hot tub that she told us about this new thing that she was working on called Reimagine End of Life. And it was all about creating spaces, physical spaces, online spaces, any type of media, art, to talk about and deal with the very human issue of death and end of life. Not like, we're not only talking death and after death, but hospice care, folks, just really encompassing everything, because it still is, despite all the good work that Reimagine and other folks around the country, other folks in the Bay Area are doing, death is still a taboo subject for
Right.
a lot of people. And so this, one of the main goals I would say of Reimagine is to destigmatize that. And because it's something we all share, let's talk about it. And so in that hot tub, not only did Dara tell us about this project, she also pitched both Bitch Talk and Storied San Francisco to do something for them.
Oh.
So that first year of Reimagine, we put together a show called Working with Death. I think you had it up on the screen. Yeah, so I kind of racked my brain. I was like, what can we do? We had the good fortune of meeting, thanks to Peter Hartlaub of the Chronicle, we met this dude named Graham Cowley, who for at least a couple decades worked in the SF medical examiner's office. Fascinating guy with, as you could imagine, so many good stories.
Yeah.
And then a couple other folks that we ended up meeting through putting this show together, one of them works in hospice, and the other does a little bit of hospice work, but also grew up very much like in the HIV/AIDS world, in and out of hospitals with their mom, and I knew was a storyteller. So we put together a show with, that's Mason J. And then the other woman who worked, she's a physician who works in hospice. Her name is Yeva Johnson. So it was those three, and Reimagine put us at Cafe du Nord that year. I've always loved Cafe du Nord, and I was like really stoked to be doing our own show there. And that went off so well. It was such
Where is Cafe du Nord located?
Yeah, so Cafe du Nord is, I guess you'd call it kind of like Castro Dubos Triangle. It's on Market, I think between Church and Sanchez, if I've got my geography right.
Let me see if I can pull it up real quick.
Yeah, it's a building. So downstairs is Cafe du Nord, and upstairs is the Swedish American Hall. That's Cafe du Nord, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's it. So that went so well. The second year, and this goes back to a frame you had brought up earlier of the laundry over in the Mission. So Reimagine asked us to come back and do something again their second year. And so I think this was Dara's idea. So credit to Dara Kotzberg, was for us to do a gigantic map of San Francisco. It was like this big ass roll up vinyl map that we did of the city. Another shout out to Jim Murphy, who designed our logo, and he designed the map for us. But we wanted to have something interactive, right? So folks could come, and we had these like numbered stickers that they could put on the map, and then write in this like journal that we had with their number and write their story that goes back to that place. So the theme, I guess, or the title of our show was a question, which I think is still up for debate: is San Francisco dying? And folks were free. We didn't want to editorialize on that too much. Folks were free to weigh in on their opinions on that topic, or just share stories that themselves would speak to, is San Francisco dying, or is it just in another constant state of change?
At the time, what was the general consensus?
Kind of a mix, I'd say. Yeah, after the fact, when we got that journal and really started looking at it, I mean, first of all, just awesome stories. So thanks to all the folks who shared. I think we ended up with about 40 or 50 different stories. And it was awesome because on that map, they corresponded to the stickers that were really all over the city. Like pockets of the city I probably still haven't been to. So that was really rewarding.
I'm curious to know if, depending on what side of the city,
what the stories are.
Yeah, what the stories were.
And what the opinions are, right?
Yeah.
I would say a mix.
Yeah.
A mix. And that probably speaks to folks' experiences and just their attitudes in general. I think I mentioned to you, I'm possibly like an eternal optimist to my own detriment. But I'm always like, like even in a pandemic, I'm like, yeah, this sucks, but it's an opportunity.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, I don't personally want to believe that San Francisco is over or that it's dead.
Mhm.
I recognize, and I don't think I'd be doing Storied San Francisco if I believed that. There are a lot of folks here, whether it's their work, whether it's their art, whether it's just their place in their own community, or their attitude toward other folks or what they're doing here. There's so many people here who are adding to the experience, and not taking from, but
Mm.
adding to. So I got to weigh in on this side that no, San Francisco is not dying. It's a huge bummer what has been happening the last roughly 10 years. I'm not, I'm definitely, against gentrification. I'm against displacement, especially of working folks. But I'm starting to see signs of hope in community leaders, in some of the folks that are getting into elected office. I'm seeing a lot of younger, more BIPOC, diverse folks that are getting in, non-binary. I'm seeing a change, and I'm latching on to that because that's what I hope for San Francisco to become, is a more welcoming, back to kind of maybe a version of what it used to be,
Yeah.
a place that welcomes folks and fosters creativity and fosters, a hardworking, appreciative, communal.
And we enjoy the quirkiness of San Francisco, right?
Absolutely.
Keeping it kind of weird. Shout out to Portland, but we do
Yeah.
it in a separate way here in San Francisco. And I want to get a little personal,
Let's
and I
do
want
it.
to share this photo.
Uh-oh. Yeah, she's a. I mean,
What's going on over here?
if I
And what?
turn,
Uh-huh.
go ahead. She's right over here.
Uh-huh. But tell us about what this whole event was about and how, when you talk about San Francisco staying alive, like it's
Yeah.
events like these, right?
Yeah.
That you realize like you're living in a community. But why am I showing this photo?
Well, quick shout out to the Roxy, which I got
Yep.
repping right here
Yep.
on my. Yeah, there's a
Good old
Roxy.
Roxy. I love Roxy. Uh-huh.
Love the Roxy. So, my fiance Erin, before her current gig, she was a film publicist,
Mm.
and so the company, she had already left at the time, but she kept in touch with some of those folks, and they knew that we have dogs. This movie was coming out by Wes Anderson called Isle of Dogs, and they were doing a premiere, like a I'm not sure what they call it
Yeah.
in that world, but they're doing an event with a red carpet for dogs.
BYOD.
Yes. So we were like, well, of course, this is Cokie Monster Hunt that you're looking at on the
Okay.
stage. So
Yeah.
she's our dog, but she's my dog. And so we knew that she'd be perfect for this. We got our neighbor, his name's Stephen Holland, but his dog's name is Charlie Bucket.
Uh-huh.
And so we all went out there. We didn't know it, but the New York Times had a photographer and a writer out there. And so Charlie Bucket and Cokie ended up being in the New York Times as a result of this. And this is one of their photos. Yeah, there she is.
Right over here.
Yeah. Yeah, Rodrigo, your sleuthing is a number one. It's really, you're good at this.
No, I love it. And I saw that image and I read on it and I was like, man, I love how you really understand the culture and the essence of San Francisco. I mean, you've been here for, I always tell people, like, I want to interview people that have at least had a quinceañera here in San Francisco.
I have to think back to 2015 what my quinceañera would have been. Hey, I think I'm overdue. I need one. Let's get it.
I'm going to throw quinceañera, RCA sponsored quinceañera for Storied SF and Jeff. But no, but on the real, like, I want to interview those folks because they've seen the changes in San Francisco. Like you said, it goes through these ebbs and flows, and only the folks that really want to create a community stay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think I probably mentioned this a few times, but I have just immense love for working folks, for creative folks. And I think the theme that connects those types of people and what I'm talking about is giving, is contributing.
Yeah.
Whereas what I see as the opposing forces just exploit and take. And I'm not about that. I'm just like, I'm on the side of the people who are making community and lifting folks, not exploiting. So so that's, I don't know, that's where my heart is, and I think will continue to be, and that's that's what I'm hopeful for. That's the folks that I'm hopeful will stay here and really dig in and use this time to get some of that spirit of San Francisco back.
No, and
And
I'm
it's going to
quoting
be
you
different. It's going to be different. It's not, we can't go back to anything that was before,
exactly.
but we can take lessons learned in the past, and themes,
Yeah.
definitely.
So vote, people.
Absolutely. There's my
Shape-
other shout out.
I know. I
Yeah,
love it.
there it
I'm
is.
my stickers. Okay, I gotta send in the ballot right now. But
Yeah,
vote.
do it. Do it.
And what I love about your podcast, and I'm gonna quote you actually, you call it an ongoing documentary of life, of art, of businesses, and everything in between. It really sums up what you're doing. And as a native San Franciscan, like I'm like, oh my God, like I'm like worshiping you because yeah, you capture people's essence. You capture the real stories behind what makes San Francisco a beautiful space. I want to share this photo. Well, it's a compilation of photos. This is from your very own Michelle. You know,
Oh yeah.
she
So this
just
was for Reimagine.
was it okay.
Yeah.
And just like how before we leave, like how would you describe her photography? Because she's a big part of Storied SF.
Oh
If you
yeah.
want to talk about it.
Yeah, definitely. So when I met her, most of her photography was street photography. But to this day, most of it is still black and white. Even though she's moved from film to digital, for us, she still does her own film photography. But I guess what I would say is gritty realness. For her to switch from street to more kind of portraiture type photography, there was a learning curve for her. But so I should say, by quick way of explanation, there have been a couple times when like she couldn't make it, and so I ended up doing like the photos on my phone, and I'm like, oh no, I mean they're fine, fine, they get the job done, but I'm like, no, this is why that's you. This is why. Yeah, I mean, I think not only her technical skills, but her human skills, her rapport that she builds with people. 9 times out of 10, we do photos after we record, so she gets a chance to sit there and like listen and get to know the folks as well. And then of course that informs what she ends up doing for her photography.
Wonderful.
And I am so, I mean, just so on the verge of tears, just so grateful to be doing this with her.
Because when I listen to the podcast and then associate the photo, it's like a match made in heaven.
Yeah.
Like she feels, their creativity, their background, their history, and then just captures it in that one photo. So kudos to you.
Thank you,
Before
Michelle.
we leave, I always have to ask these questions. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, let's do it.
3 questions. 1, favorite restaurant in San Francisco?
Oh man.
I know.
Superlatives. I hate superlatives. I'm also a Libra.
We'll keep it in the realm of a few of your favorites.
Okay, cool. Not only a favorite, but a shout out because I know those folks. Tony's Pizza Napolitana over in North Beach. Going back old school to my roots in San Francisco, Puerto Alegre in the Mission. Hello, Puerto. Love you. Had so many birthdays and just celebrations there, some of which I remember. Yeah, there it is. Wow. I like a lot of the old school restaurants. Taddage Grill down in the financial district, Gold Mirror out on Taraval, old school Italian. Joseph Westlake. I know it's not the city, but gotta love Joseph Westlake. Man, I don't know. It's just, I know I'm forgetting so many, probably restaurants that my friends own. Sorry, guys. I love you all.
Good. No, and I'm writing down a list because every time I ask, I'm like, babe, we're going to go eat here.
Oh, yes, you are. Yeah. There they are. Yeah, there's Gold Mirror. Super old school Italian.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, awesome stuff.
What about your favorite street or streets?
Shout out to Calle 24. Sorry. In the Mission, I've always.
Okay.
So when I lived in the Mission, I lived on 20th Street between Mission and Valencia. But already in 2003, when I moved there, I was just like, when I discovered, I don't know when it was I discovered 24th Street, but I was like, this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to this day, despite the gentrification, I still love 24th Street. Shout out to La Palma. First and
I
foremost,
was
La
just there
Palma.
yesterday. Actually, they gave me a pound of carnitas.
Okay, so we're having dinner tonight. Is that what you're saying?
Of course.
Okay.
Send over. Just
Awesome.
bring the salsa, make the red and green salsa.
I'm gonna give the salsa to them.
No, that's great. No, we love La Palma. Shout out to La Palma. Your favorite park?
I'm just gonna go with lately, because there's so many parks in the city, and they're all dope in one way or another.
Mm-hmm.
But lately, for some reason, probably because I've switched where I live, but I'm digging Alamo Square. And I've always loved Alamo Square. I lived at Webster and Hayes for a minute and used to take my dog there. But lately, on the west side, I'm like, yeah, there's the Painted Ladies and the famous view. But if you go to the other side, it's like, especially in COVID, it's like less crowded, and there's dope houses right there too that no one takes photos of. So yeah, it's just, it's a good, for me, it's a walking distance from my house. Good walk there. Yeah, I'm just liking what Alamo Square is bringing. So
great. Cool. Let's wrap it up.
Okay.
I think the Niners are playing.
Oh, then we got to get out of here because no one's going to watch
us. But no, anything else? Anything you want to let people know? What's in the pipeline? What are you looking forward to with Storied SF?
Yeah, so a couple things I wanted to mention. Michelle and I believe 7 other photographers are putting on an actual live show. They're going to project photos on a large wall over at 63 Bluxom Street this Thursday. I believe it's the 15th, 14th, 15th. I don't know what the date is. It's called 214, and the significance of that is on that day, we will have been in shelter in place for 214 days.
Ooh.
So for that show, 63 Bluxom, Battle on Burning again. Thank you for allowing them to do that. Local brewery next door is going to be open for takeaway food and drinks. So it's going to be I believe there's going to be a DJ. It's going to be a real live event. Remember those?
I love it. I want to go.
In an alley. There it is. That's it. Yeah. So it's going to be in an alley, so plenty of room for folks to spread out. Wear your masks, please. Yeah. Wear your masks and vote. And vote once, but wear your mask all the time. So that's pretty cool. And then the other thing I wanted to shout out is Bitch Talk's 500th episode. That's going to be on the 21st of October at 8 p.m. Sorry, the 214 show is going to be at 7:30. It's right there, 7:30 to 10:30.
Perfect.
Bitch Talk 500 on October 21st, starting at 8 p.m. And that's going to be a mixed kind of like live event and some pre-recorded stuff from some really amazing artists. Couple shout outs: Ruby Ibarra, Irina Spiritu for the music, Frankie Quinones, and a group called Frangela for kind of the comedy and the politics.
Yeah,
they're going to be doing.
Oh, there it goes.
There it is. Yeah, and then a couple of dancers. Shout out to Marina, Nurse Boogie. She and a partner of hers, Laura. I'm forgetting Laura's last name, and I'm sorry, but they're going to be doing some dance. So you got music, you got comedy and politics, and you got dance. It's going to be a rad event. Donation based. Please give to these ladies. They're hustling. They've been doing it for 7 years.
500 episodes.
And 500. I mean, you can just go through their catalog and you're like, okay, David Diggs, W. Kamau Bell, the list just goes on and on and on. Yeah. They've had some amazing guests. And it's just it's for me super inspiring show. I happen to know them, so I also find some of the humor in it, but it's
no, it's admirable. Well, 2 things: I gotta start watching the show. I mean the game, and 2, I gotta finish the Ricky Rat conversation you had, which is really dope. People,
love that guy.
So let's stay in touch, Jeff.
Please do. Thank you, Rodrigo. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
It's been fun. Gracias.
Absolutely.
All right. Ciao, mi gente. I'll see you in 2 weeks. Peace.